I'm Mel, and I'm an adventure artist, and today I want to take you through a sketchbook tour of this little sketchbook I made over the course of a year. This little book has helped transform my work to be more confident and playful, and I'm feeling like I can be a fiction writer with color because of the practice and lessons that I learned in making this sketchbook. Over the course of the last year, I have transformed from a person that chronically never finishes sketchbooks to someone who regularly completes them and actually has real learning gains every single time that I do. So today, I'm going to take you through how I set this up, the things that I was doing specifically to help myself grow, and I'm also going to share some vulnerability because I tell you what, in a sketchbook this thick, not everything is good. There are lots of failed paintings, but in all of them, I have learned. Before we begin, go ahead and get yourself a cup of tea or another beverage that you like, sit back, relax, and let's get into the sketchbook tour. I started this on April 2nd of 2024, and here were my sketchbook's rules. These are the things that allowed me to finish this sketchbook in a year and a month. First, I wanted to draw and paint from observation whenever possible. This is kind of like core exercises when you are working out. They're the things that you don't want to do, but are foundational for improving your technique and your style. Take breaks when your hand hurts. That's an important reminder for me to rest. I also wanted to do sketches of different shots or thumbnails for YouTube, but I ended up abandoning that idea because I really wanted to use this as a teaching space. So I was also using this sketchbook as a teaching space for examples and demos when I taught. And then I had the big focus to be on my spring and early summer adventures. How can I showcase the story? And near the end, I ended up actually adding additional rules of how can I increase the energy and power of color? Can I be more of a fiction writer with how I use color and shape? So with that first rule, both of these were created from life. So really just starting out strong with observational paintings. This was a drawer that was discarded on a street in Berkeley, and I thought it was so beautiful, so I painted it, as well as this kind of decaying chair in my friend's yard, some poppies at Bees and Blooms Farm in Santa Rosa, one of the many places I teach, the wisteria there, some prickly pears out on my patio, the lacy phacelia at Bees and Blooms, and then here I am giving demos for my students, so showing them how gouache is opaque and how it can layer over even the darkest of colors, showing them different ways to frame your compositions using a grid. And then here I am sketching one of the creative retreat zines that I made last year. One of my favorite views in the East Bay, this little thing that you can see in Walnut Creek that I lovingly call the nipple. This was a sketch for a commission that I did of Glacier National Park. So for the most part, everything has been gouache, but this one here, as well as this drawing back here, were done using Tombow brush pens. So I have a series of these little guys, and I like that they're a brush on one side and then a felt tip marker on the other, and they're water-based, so you can fly with them, and I swatched them in the front, so I always had a reference as to what the color actually looked like. So just going through here, more with the Tombow brush pen, even more with the brush pen, just really trying to see how far I can push these things. And then when I went on a trip to Costa Rica, most of that trip I was really focused on, like, how can I draw this really cool bird from observation using the brush pen. Another great bird. This one's from a photo. More of the air plants that I love there. My family's cat. And I was struggling with these markers. I don't necessarily think that these were, huge achievements, but I was really just trying to play and see what I could do. And I was also learning the limitations of the paper in this sketchbook. It sometimes pills in certain areas, but this trip it was great to shoot photos with my camera and then come back and make sketches. This one I did on site near this place called Rio Celeste. Another one I did on site using the Tombow brush pens. And then I made both of these from photos. Super fun stuff. One of my lunches that I illustrated, like a plant and the hot sauce and a cup of coffee. It was just so fun to think about this trip and to go back in time and actually see the story of the trip, like how I climbed a tree and my favorite things to eat and being able to spot this rare bird called a quetzal. So cool. We got to see it nesting. A nice little bench by a pond I observed. Driveway where I was staying. One of the cities. And this one, and even this one, I didn't think were very strong, but I'm starting to get somewhere here where I'm really thinking about simplifying my shapes. And then I really love this one of the solitaire kind of hiding back in this little hole that it made for a nest. And then all of these in this next section were made on the flight back. So in the plane / waiting at LAX. And these are all using Tombow brush pens and just really, really simple markers or pens. Like I always typically use a Muji black pen, so that's what we're seeing here. So yeah, just experimenting. What could I do with gouache? What could I do with marker? How could they work to influence one another? More marker drawings. Just really experimenting. Some weird stuff's happening here, but I think overall on this trip and with the experiences that I had with these markers, I was learning a lot about how I can push and simplify shapes in the same way that illustrators do. So then I came back and I made both of these actually waiting for my flight at LAX after it was delayed like 6 times. This is when I'm starting to discover that when plants are being reflected by light from above, there's usually some really interesting blues that happen. So really getting those in with the gouache. And then I went on a trip to paint with my friend Christina and Kelsey at the Botanical Garden in Berkeley. And I did this. This is redwood from Asia. I did this while I was sitting at my booth on a slow day. Some more poppies. This is the drawing I did at Twin Peaks from Observation. This is as far as I got for drawing before it got too cold and foggy. I did this one on a little adventure going to Mission Dolores Park. And then I saw one of my friends play a show in the Mission. Okay, so this one's a funny spread. I took my friend on a hike. We were way too late on our hike and they ended up having to take a doctor's appointment in the car. So I entertained myself by pulling over on the side of the road and just sitting on the side of the road and painting some of the beautiful things that I saw on this windy mountain road. This one was from a photo that I studied at Twin Peaks, and it's slowly being worked up into a painting of that day. So when I got here, this is when I was a little less than halfway through, and I started to question whether or not I liked the paper in this sketchbook or if I wanted to keep using it, because here's a study I did for a commission. And I ended up picking up this Moleskine sketchbook that had really nice paper and was using that to create these notan drawings, or notan. You can correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. In my sketchbook to really get my compositions to be a little bit stronger. So really just trying this out. And so I tried to do it in the landscape and failed, but that's okay. That's all right. Here I am making some thumbnails at Castle Lake near Mount Shasta when it was still covered in snow. This was really fun to paint from observation. Another stone from Castle Creek from observation using the Tombow brush pens. And then this one I created when I got back based on a photo I took of this exact rock. This spread right here is pointing out one of my biggest weaknesses. I am really good at looking at a photo and being able to render that photo. But when I'm working from observation, I struggle with values and shapes. So that is the struggle that I tried to untangle throughout the rest of this sketchbook. So again, more work from photos. This was a bird in Costa Rica. This was an old retreat center that we had stumbled upon, and some of the buildings there. I love to draw buildings and houses, especially from photographs. I think that they're so cool. A secret lake that we saw. Another painting of Rio Celeste. Really just trying to simplify my forms though. Even though I'm working from a photo, I'm trying to say, like, how can I make it simpler? How can I make things more blocky? How can I be less exact and just allow some things to be abstracted in the background? I really liked the way that this one turned out of Rio Celeste with that gorgeous blue water. This one's also from a photo, and I think this shows the weakness of working from photos, because like this section I don't feel like is very resolved. This one's from a photo, and I think if I were doing this from observation now with the information I know, this should be so much warmer with such deeper values, and then this in the background can kind of fade back in space. Hummingbird turned out pretty cute. I also really liked this one of Lake Arenal. This is the volcano down in the background from Costa Rica. So lots of paintings from Costa Rica. I got so inspired when I was there. I just think it's such a cool country. And then I came back and I said, hey, you've been working from photos so much. You need to go be in nature and actually work from observation. So I went on a little art adventure to Marin, and I sat at Limantour Beach and painted this, and the fog rolled in, and it was really fun to work from observation and be more blocky and free with my marks. I did these all using the Tombow brush pens at Castle Lake again. I ended up going back up there in June. And then here's just some quick little testing of materials for some of my students and talking about how to draw perspective in a room. Then this is Lake Eleanor that I saw in the Trinity Alps. That was really beautiful to see in July, like 4th of July weekend. I also was going to draw this little creek here. And then this is, you can really see sort of how I kind of chicken scratch a preliminary drawing down. But my friends that I was with ended up sitting here with their dog. And so I didn't really want to do a study of moving people, so I just kind of left that blank. I did both of these. You can actually watch the whole video of me painting these at Sumag State Park up in Trinidad, California. This was from observation, and this is when I felt like I finally had a true breakthrough. I was like, oh my gosh. Working from observation is the place where I can start to figure out how can I push shape, how can I push color, how can I challenge myself to do hard things, to work from observation more and more. And this felt like a huge breakthrough for me. So then I did it again in the redwoods, because when you take a photograph in the redwoods, it always looks really flat or really dark, but there's so much color depth and warmth in these forests. They're so beautiful. Then next up, I'm working from photos again here, but I'm trying to adapt and pull from what I learned working from observation. So these are some mushrooms that I spotted on some bark in Parisma Creek redwoods on the peninsula of the Bay Area. This is Mount Diablo at peak waterfall season. And really just simplifying even these shapes for the leaves and the foliage. I'm just saying, how can I be playful? How can I push shape? How can I push color even more here by using this gold for where the sun is hitting the rocks and this purple? Then over here, I've got Dolores Park. I did this one from observation, hanging out with my friend Veronica. And then some snapdragons I did from observation in the UC Botanical Garden. Then here I am giving demos to my students, telling them to focus on shapes and make thumbnails and what they can learn from making thumbnails and focusing on those shapes. Then next I went back to the UC Berkeley Botanical Garden and spotted some more mushrooms on a redwood with lichen, and so made a painting of those. This is my cat Wolfie. He was really sick when I painted this, and I was worried he was going to pass, but he's 15 and still living strong. Here I've got some tests that I did for my students. So I was showing them the different levels of opacity that you can get with gouache and watercolor. And then here's me showing them the different marks you can make with a single brush. And then both of these are from photos. This was when I went to a wedding at the Leach Botanical Garden up in Oregon. And this was really fun. But again, I'm trying to simplify shape. I've been watching so many Studio Ghibli movies and annoying all of my friends that I watch them with by being like, hey guys, I'm sorry, I have to stop. We have to pause and I have to take a photo of this moment so I can study what they did. trying to simplify and showcase the light shining through the trees through here. I'm really loving the way that this turned out and the framing of this composition. I love how loose I kept the foliage down here and up here. I'm starting to finally get to the point where I can let go of the need to have every detail in a painting. So this one was also a huge breakthrough for me. So I started working on a commission for a client who said, I really love madrones. Can you make me a painting of a madrone? And I said, yeah, sure thing. Thinking I was going to use a photograph and work directly from the photo. I ended up setting them a pitch. So I made a preliminary painting in my sketchbook. I sent them that and they were like, yeah, I really love this, but can you make it 16 by 20 and instead of making it vertical, make it horizontal? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. I ended up going on multiple hikes to look at madrones, to take lots of photographs of them. I made this value study in black and white to figure out the strong values in the painting, and then made this one in gouache to really figure out how I wanted to render the madrone and make it very pink and flamboyant. And then I made a final oil painting and it turned out excellent. And it just unlocked something in me where I was like, oh, I can be loose and more vague. I don't have to have everything be perfectly figured out all the time. Thanks so much for watching this far already. I really appreciate you being here. I want to let you know that if you've seen a sketch in this sketchbook that you've liked so far, go ahead and check out the link down below to my in-print shop, where I actually am selling prints of some of my favorite spreads from this sketchbook. So you can actually have my art on your walls. Another thing I want to let you know about is that I am trying to move to the forest in order to start a creative retreat center, which means that I'm moving from a lot of teaching in person to teaching online. And that means I've been dreaming up so many amazing courses, including one about self-compassion in your sketchbook. So there's a little link down below where you can see all the different courses that I'm cooking up, and you can sign up for the email newsletter for each of the courses to find out when they're happening, and hopefully you're feeling inspired to learn from me as an instructor, because I would love to teach you. Another thing that you can do to just support the Retreat Center dream is to sign up for my Substack newsletter or to just subscribe right here on YouTube. That is a huge help for making sure that my videos help reach others. So on this spread, I have a little study I did of Maury Point in Pacifica, and I added 2 little birds to represent me and my partner as little birds. And then I worked on this tester for my students, and this is an assignment that I give them in my beginner watercolor class, which is to make a recipe book of all your colors. So you look at the photo that you're working from, and you write down the mixture that you made as you're going. And then you can even write down, okay, so maybe number 9 is number 7 with a touch of phthalo green. So it's this with a little bit of that. So that was fun, and it was so great seeing them create these themselves in their sketchbooks. This was me testing out different colors. I did this drawing from observation using just colored pencils at the Sinol Ohlone Regional Park. I felt like this rock was so pink in person, but then I drew my cat Internet having a little nap, and also worked with colored pencil. Then I painted some more redwoods. Again, I love these freaking trees. This one I used a really, really dark, almost underexposed photo and some acrylic gouache to get really nice, opaque, deep values. And when I work with acrylic gouache, I'm using a really limited palette, and it seems that when I work with a limited palette, I can really push my values to be so much stronger. So this felt like another big discovery for me. Then I was taking some inspiration from James Gurney here and painted this old truck that I saw on a morning walk that I thought was really cool. And then this was me hanging out with my friend in San Francisco trying to paint from observation, and it was way too humid and the watercolor just was not drying fast enough. But hey, we tried. Not every painting is going to be a winner. Then this was a really nice golden hour in my dining room. I wanted to sort of romanticize the library that I've created. If you've seen any of my video essay style videos, you've seen me sitting in front of this. That's what it looks like. These were 2 very strange red chairs that were discarded on the side of the road in Portland, and I just had to pull over and take photos of them and work from those photos. So both of these, I'm working from photos, but I'm really trying to loosen up and think about how I can simplify the marks that I'm laying down and not be so exact about everything. So like really simplifying back here, up here, even in the books, I'm not letting myself get in with text and get every single title on there. So here's me teaching thumbnails again, and also showing this swatching technique because I teach watercolor so often. This is me showing them different techniques for getting clouds. I worked on this when I was at Upper Sardine Lake from Observation, just using colored pencil, just really getting this gorgeous bright blue of the snow. Some rocks at Upper Sardine Lake. This one's weird. These are my rules for my students. Rules: washes of big shapes, look for general color, don't get fussy, and done is better than perfect. Oddly, these have been additional rules for me in this sketchbook too. I abandoned this sketchbook for a couple of months, and I came back to it to do Plein April, a challenge that I've always seen and have thought was so intimidating and I could never do it. And this year, I did it. And it started by me attending a demo by Angela Sung, who I love her work. I think that she's super freaking talented. And I was like, okay, how does she handle shape and how does she handle color as I watch her paint? And so I took notes essentially using colored pencil. And then I applied that to another photograph that I had taken in the redwoods. And I was like, okay, how do I render this with colored pencil to really push color to an almost unnatural but whimsical way in the way that Angela did here? Some more colored pencil and gouache studies of some oak trees at moonrise. The spring. This was fun, where I was like using colored pencil and then using an X-Acto blade to actually scratch away the texture of the paper. Just seeing what rules I could break, essentially. Then here I am, working from a photo. I think this is pretty weak, but I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to let myself be exact. I'm going to just allow things to be whimsical and to simplify things in the background. So then I was working from another set of images of Shell Ridge on Mount Diablo, and there's this nice little rusted out wheelbarrow, but there's lupin and poppies. Again, doing this with colored pencil and trying to see how I can push color. I feel like what's going on here is really strong because there's good value development, whereas up here everything's kind of just like hazy, romanticized, beautiful, but not necessarily dynamic. Here's another one working from those photos. This is using acrylic gouache. This one's all right. I love how I'm getting more playful, but I think I'm trying too hard to make the color exact to what I see in the photo. And that was leading to some like really boring things happening here. Like, I think that this color back here is almost too blue. Oddly, right after I finished this one was when I had an absolute breakthrough. So I made this painting based off a hike I did on New Year's of a redwood forest up in Marin, and I really, really loved how I handled this. I used acrylic gouache, and I was loving how I was using purples and oranges and different temperatures of green to render the different rock colors and the plants and keeping the shapes nice and loose. This to me felt like the epitome of applying the lessons from this observational drawing, but in a virtual plein air setting. And then with this one, this was the exact same river as these two, same creek. But with this one, I asked myself the question, how can I make it gayer? How can I make the water more pink, the water more purple, and have an almost magical and fantasy idea behind it? And I really, really love the way that this turned out and how simple I kept the shape so loose. So then I went to a plein air paint out event with some other folks from the Bay Area and painted this then I painted this apple blossom tree with a little bike in front of it that one of the organizers put there to make a nice, interesting composition. And I think this is getting into interesting places. I don't love it, but I think I'm getting somewhere. Here was me making some observational sketches. But then here, I feel like I'm getting somewhere. In both of these, I feel like I started to unlock how I wanted to handle more environmental, hazy moments. With this one, I also was just letting myself play with how I could push the color more and more and not use pure white for any highlights, but use salmon oranges and yellows to really push my work. I love how simple I left the foreground of this one too. This one was me trying to be silly. My partner having some lizard time in the grass after reading the news. This was me doing something that I did back in college. So I had this phase in college where I was painting all of my Sims houses that I would build. And lately I've been really into building Earthships in The Sims. So this is me painting a Sims house. If you want to see me give tours of my Sims builds, they are all solar punk communities. So I could definitely do that. Leave me a comment and let me know. So I went on a trip to Humboldt County and stayed in a little town there called Arcata, where they have a bird marsh. And this is a marbled godwit. I made him very fluffy. And then I painted him again, just like strutting along the shore. This I made for a Substack post as a little illustration to just talk about how I want to gather with friends and have dinner in the forest. So then a big unlock happened for me when I studied Robert Genn. So this is an oil painting that I made a study of here in gouache. And man, there's so much happening here. I said that I learned that you can be bold with your greens, blues, and purples in the shadows. You can get even more blobby around those warm edges that they like to exaggerate the warmth. So yeah, I want to study more artists, especially like this. I want to study Lois Dodd. I want to study Fairfield Porter and how they simplify their mark making, and then essentially study someone and then make my own version of it, which I did on the next page here. So I did this study of a Scott Hamill oil painting that he made from observation in a redwood forest, and I loved the way that this was rendered. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take what I learned from this and I'm going to apply it to my own little study of some redwoods that I observed recently in Reinhardt Regional Redwood Park. And I think that this is much stronger than the painting I made in plein air, because I'm learning step by step how to be better at conveying light and being more selective with choosing where I want things to be saturated only for that sake of emphasis. So with this one, this is where I felt like everything started to make sense. And of course that happens like 2 pages before the end. So I made this painting of this really great rock that always inspires me when I'm driving on California's 36. And so I was like, okay, I am going to take this photo and then I'm going to push the color as far as possible. So I made it look like sunset. And I love the way that I handled the rocks and the shapes, and I'm just letting things get kind of wacky, but this is feeling like me. Like this to me is so much more embodied and real and me than like something like this. Like here I'm rendering a photo correctly. Whereas here I'm saying, I'm an artist, I have an artistic license. How can I push this in ways that are going to be more exciting for someone to look at? Then next up, I have Sumeg State Park. This was that same place that I went painting from observation, but I took a photo reference that I took on a really, really gray day there. And I said, how can I make it more romantic and purple and blue and pink? And this was the end result. So lastly, I did one other study in here of Jessie Winchester Schmidt, because this painting, I literally saved it to my computer as I want to learn to paint like this. And so I studied it. Like every brushstroke, how did he do this? What is the secret to making something like this happen? I took this photo on my phone 2 years ago and attempted to make a painting and ended up covering it up completely and abandoning it because I didn't think that I could make it interesting. The light wasn't interesting. It was at like 2 p.m. But taking and applying some of the ways that Winchester Schmidt is pushing color and pushing that color over here made me feel really excited about what's possible. So that's it. That is all I did. That's all she wrote for this sketchbook. So that about wraps this sketchbook. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate you being here. Go ahead and leave me a comment down below to let me know what your favorite spread was with a little timestamp. Let me know if you have any thoughts, suggestions, ideas, and until next time, stay creative and find your own way to persistently bloom. See ya.